Could I ask you to please quiet down? Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. The City of Grand Haven regular City Council meeting of November 6th, 2023 is hereby called to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Fritz,
Here.
Lowe,
Here.
McLaughlin,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
McNally.
Here. The invocation this evening will be delivered by Pastor Don McGee of the Grand Haven Community Baptist Church. Would everyone please rise for the invocation and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, thank you for letting me be here again. And after the snow is all gone and a beautiful day, let's bow our heads, will we? Our Father, we come to you in the name of your Son, Jesus, and we just ask you to look over these proceedings tonight. We want to thank you before things get going that in a time when the world is experiencing so much violence and experiencing war, that you've given us such peace here. And we thank you for those who keep the peace and for those who preserve the peace for us. And we also know as we go now into a time of the year when we celebrate, when we're together with families and we enjoy bounty, we know there's some of those in our community who are doing without. And we ask you to help us be mindful of them and help us to touch them. We ask you to bless them and lift them up. And Lord, we know that tomorrow is an election day, that the polls are going out, and we just pray that you will guide and direct in every hand and everything that is done in there. And we ask you to lead these proceedings, Lord, and bring peace and discussion, and let everything be done positively and to the good of the people. And we just ask you all this, and we just say amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time, this is the first call to the audience, one of two opportunities in the meeting. Members of the audience may address council on any item.
We have the approval of the consent and regular
Oh,
agenda
sorry,
first.
missed it. Thank you, Maria. I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent and regular agendas.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Will you take the roll, please, Maria?
Fritz,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Now we have the first call to the audience, one of two opportunities. Members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address and will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration but will not have a response at this time. Those not physically present who would like to may dial in at 616-935-3203. If it continues ringing, please remain on the line until your turn. We will take all callers. Is there anyone who would like to address council? Please stand up, sir.
Thank you. Robert Berg, 131 Prospect. I'm here to talk about cemetery fees for residents, non-residents. In August, a local legend died, 62 years out of his 67. He lived in Grand Haven, Paul Robinson. He was my ride or die for 60 years. I took care of the expenses through a GoFund, and I ended up paying some out of my own pocket. Now, they charged me $3,700 for Paul, and the residents are $1,700. He lived in Grand Haven for 62 years. Now, in that ordinance, cemetery ordinance, there's, ironically, it's section 11.6. It talks about exceptions. And I believe it's between the cemetery board, which I did attend a cemetery board, and the city manager. So it rubs me a little bit wrong way when somebody can move in here, establish a residence, and get the $1,700. But a man that's lived here for 62 years, all-state wrestler, all-American, all academic, his fee is $3,700. So moving forward, I think there is some gray area that I didn't know about until I read the ordinance today, with the exceptions. I was wondering if maybe you could change that or entertain changing, having special circumstances like the one that I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, Jim Hagan, 400 Lake. I would like to continue talking about the facts matter. And I think most of Grand Haven's residents would agree with that maxim. And we've lately been hearing from some in the community that the BLP is way behind the curve when it comes to renewable power implementation. Well, let's look at the facts. The Federal Energy Information Administration, the EIA, data shows that renewables accounted for only 12% of power generation in Michigan in 2022. Where was the BLP in 2022? They purchased 22% renewable power, 83% higher than the Michigan average of renewable power generation. But let's get down to something that all customers can understand and answer the question of how many BLP customers did that additional 10% of renewables represent. The answer is an additional 1,500 customers were supplied with renewable power by the BLP in 2022, bringing the total to about 3,300 customers being supplied by renewable power. I'm proud that the BLP is a leader in moving our community quicker to a low-carbon power portfolio than most of the state. Not only are they moving quicker, but they are providing power at about 25 to 30% lower cost than the other large local power provider, which is Consumers Energy. I think we've heard a lot about Consumers Energy, how reliable they are and how expensive they are for the residential customers. The BLP's plan is to continue to move forward with greater renewables, and they're projected to achieve around 28 to 29% renewables by 2025. BLP's program's sound. They invest wisely. They don't take undue risk. And they are, yes, they are a leader in the renewable power supply. We've heard a lot that they're not, but I think the data actually shows that they are, especially when you compare them to the local companies. You know, you may want to say, well, Traverse City has a more forward outlook. Well, we're not in Traverse City. We're here in Ottawa County. And I think they are definitely the winner in renewables in Ottawa County. So vote no on the charter change. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Mike Weaver, 637 Lake Avenue. Kind of piggybacking on that in regards to BLP. We've had that for over 100 years. We've had 70 years of a citizen-elected board running the BLP, and we've had great success. And I think this past snowstorm told you exactly how much success we had. We had zero, I believe, downtime, or if we did, it was minimal. There were houses 10 miles north of here that took days to get power back on. So we've had a beautifully run Board of Light and Power. You may or may not agree with the management or manager currently, but here's the thing. You get to vote on that directly. This initiative is asking you to permanently give up your vote and turn it over to 3 of the 5 councilmen you see up here. Now that changes every 2 years. So here's the question. With all the other troubles we have, do we really need to add that burden on? And it's the burden, this group is trying to put the burden not just on council, but on our city manager, who already has a full plate. So what are they trying to accomplish? It looks to me like they're trying to hijack a very well-run operation and help use it to subsidize our city that has not been run well with our current configuration. And it's not just current, it's been going on. Pat McGinnis buried us, okay? It's gonna take time to dig us out. And if you didn't notice who was a supporter of this, Pat McGinnis, who doesn't even work for us, doesn't live here. He lives in Portage, Michigan and works for them. He's sticking his nose into our business, hopefully for the very last time, because I can tell you, based on my dealings with him, he was no picnic, okay? So please keep our system in place, keep power. It is so important to keep power on and safe for everybody. And this nonsense about switching over because a few people don't like something and entrusting it and dumping it on city council is foolishness. Now, that's one. Two, there on the schedule I saw a retaining wall on Highland Park that I personally checked out. And I'm like, 20 G's from the city to kick into a private residence when their own association won't pay? I went and looked at it. That wall is falling over solely because there were two big trees on their property that they did not maintain. You can see how they grew so big, they started pushing the wall over, then they cut the trees down. I have retaining walls on my house that are now gonna be 90-some years old. They're in perfect condition, okay? So please don't write a check for 20 grand when you could not afford $10,000 for calendars for your citizens to keep up to date on things. It smacks of opportunism. And we all know they have friends and neighbors in that same situation there that if we start
Thanks,
giving them
Mike.
20 grand for nothing, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We've got a presentation at this time. It's a resolution of appreciation to Keegan Deckert, Eagle Scout. And Maria, could you read it for us?
Whereas the city of Grand Haven recognizes and values the contributions of its citizens, particularly the youth who demonstrate exceptional leadership, dedication, and service to the community. And whereas the rank of Eagle Scout is the highest attainable rank in the Boy Scouts of America, achieved by only a select number of individuals who have demonstrated exceptional character, leadership, and commitment to community service. And whereas Keegan Deckert of Troop 165, a resident of Grand Haven, has exemplified these qualities and has successfully completed many of the rigorous requirements necessary to attain the rank of Eagle Scout. And whereas Keegan has demonstrated exceptional leadership skills by planning and executing a significant community service project, which has made a positive and lasting impact on our city. And whereas Keegan spent over 40 hours on his Eagle Scout project to rehabilitate Fritz Field, painting fences and replacing end caps for the benefit of the Tri-Cities Kids League. And whereas Keegan has consistently displayed dedication, perseverance, and a strong commitment to the values of the Scout Oath and Law, embodying the principles of honesty, integrity, and service to others. Now therefore be it resolved, Grand Haven City Council commends Keegan Deckert for his exceptional leadership, exemplary character, and commitment to community service. Be it further resolved, a copy of this resolution shall be permanently filed in the records of the city of Grand Haven as a testament to the significant contributions of Keegan Deckert and his dedication to making our city a better place.
Thank you, Maria. Keegan, could you join us? To attend 3 different Eagle Scout Courts of Honor. One for my nephew, really excited about, and it's a wonderful ceremony that commemorates a significant achievement. And it's an achievement that includes leadership, organization, and sweat equity. So I just want to thank you for the improvements to our baseball team, and congratulate you on a good job well done.
Thank you.
Got anything you need to say? Use the microphone.
I guess I'll just go over briefly my project. I've done, I think I started around like June of this year, just going over and like the beginning processes of the Eagle Scout, like the Eagle Scout project. It took a lot of work, I think it took a lot more work just like planning it out, like preparing everything up. Just emergency protocols, having everything laid out so that nothing went wrong, and I knew what, as an Eagle Scout candidate, they wanted me to know what I was getting, what I would be getting into in that project, how it was going to be laid out so that I didn't make any simple mistakes, and how to like come back and rethink it if I had made a mistake. I also worked a lot with a bunch of different people in my troop. Mr. Ostro, thank you, Mr. Hardbeck, my scoutmaster, and I mean the countless people that have helped me with the actual painting of the Fritz Field fence, which that took, I'd say, about a week, like within a couple of days that I actually spent doing the project. But I got a lot of help from so many different people that I couldn't have done the fence alone without them. So I'm very grateful for all of you. But I put a lot of work into just preparing for it and then going into the actual painting of the fence. So like I'm glad the fence it was rusting. It needed a recoating of paint, and parts of the end caps were missing and needed, as well as like parts of the actual fence that had been like slanted or falling down. So, and it's a great opportunity for an Eagle Scout project. I'm so glad I was able to help, like the Fritz brothers, Mike Fritz right here on the city council. I worked very closely with them. You guys were very helpful, so thank you for that. And I couldn't have done it without all the help, but it's good to have it done. I'm glad I could give back to here, just the city alone, as well as the community. And that field is, I think, the #1 field used by the Tri-Cities Kids League right here. So being able to help them out in their pursuit of baseball excellence, their pursuit of baseball excellence, yes. So I'm glad I could help. Thank you.
Come on, get out there.
Mike, come on out. We can get them all.
No.
Stand right in the middle. Kevin, you're gonna have a hard time.
So I have a hard time with that.
You guys up?
All right.
Okay. Maria, would you read the consent agenda aloud, please?
Item A, approve amended council meeting minutes of October 2 and regular council meeting minutes of October 16, 2023. B, approve the bills memo in the amount of $1,850,122.75. Item C, approve a resolution recognizing Keegan Deckert for his efforts with improvements to Fritz Field. Item D, authorize the city manager to submit a Michigan Lighthouse Assistance Program grant application in the amount of $60,000, providing matching funds in the amount of $60,000 to be reimbursed by the city, by the Grand Haven Lighthouse Conservancy for inner lighthouse improvements, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item E, accept the proposal from Aben Marsh of Benton Harbor, Michigan, in the amount of $25,000 to provide engineering services for 2024 street resurfacing, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item F, approve a professional services agreement with Aben Marsh Consultants, Inc. for the Columbus Avenue reconstruction project from 4th Street to Beacon Boulevard in the not-to-exceed amount of $425,535, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item G, approve a professional services agreement with Aben Marsh Consultants, Inc. for the Fulton Avenue reconstruction project from 1st to 5th Streets in the not-to-exceed amount of $393,835, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item H, approve a professional services agreement with Aben Marsh Consultants, Inc. for the traffic signal replacement at Robbins Road and Beech Tree in the not-to-exceed amount of $82,850, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item I, approve a resolution to enter into a 5-year lease and maintenance agreement for citywide multifunction printer devices with Applied Innovation of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents.
Okay, is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda as written?
So moved.
Support?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please, Maria.
Fritz?
I just wanted to discuss
Oh, yep.
on. He asked
Little
if there was
discussion.
anybody want to talk on it. I said yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Mike.
Item F, is that one that's been on our list to do for a long time? Is it-
Derek out there? Dana is.
Dana?
Okay.
We've asked to have a study done on all our systems again. Is this on the top of the list for us?
Yes, this is one that was identified for fiscal year 25, 26. So it's not 24, 25, but the following year. And due to both the amount of time that is needed to prepare for that project, in particular with the railroad that crosses through, as well as the development pressures that we're experiencing, we need to start working on it now. But it is at the top of the list.
It's on the top of our list. I
Yep,
just wanted to make
it is.
sure.
Yep, Fulton and Columbus are right up at the top.
Well, yeah, I know Fulton is. It's both of us in my own neighborhood, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. And you're glad you're planning for the railroad construction, but because it's what happened down in Kalamazoo down there, it affected a lot of businesses and people. And we gotta make sure that we don't disrupt a whole lot, so need to do planning very well. So thank you.
Yep, and we're always continuing to refine our planning, so we're always
Absolutely.
and looking at our assets. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Dana, I saw that the two projects were scheduled for different fiscal years, but
Correct.
in the Avonmarsh documents, it looked like they thought I forget which of them was the second one. It was the Columbus one was the railroad crossing. It looked like they thought they might be able to advance that in time. So I guess what I'm hoping we're making sure of is that we don't try to do Columbus and Fulton
No,
at the same time.
certainly not. That is not our intention. We are not planning that at all. What they were referring to was the possibility of starting Fulton a tad bit earlier in the fall of 2024 instead of the spring of 2024. And we're not yet or 25, excuse me, I misspoke, to make sure that we're appropriately planning for the flow of traffic around downtown, and certainly we're not going to have those overlap in any way whatsoever.
Okay, and the Columbus Railroad crossing isn't going to change the direction of the traffic, right?
That's not what we're evaluating. It's just a
That's
matter
what I
of
assumed.
working with the railroad in terms of the infrastructure needs underneath, which still takes time to get approval or permitting from CSX.
And
Takes
I-
about 6 to 9 months to work through that process.
I know there's a Beacon Boulevard redo coming in the relatively near future. This would just coordinate with that or
Yes, we would make sure that anything we're preparing for would coordinate with that Beacon Boulevard work. And so I think in the next year or so, we have some public meetings coming up around Beacon Boulevard. Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's correct, but I
Yep.
don't believe they intend on any construction till at least 2029.
Right.
Okay.
Quite some
So,
time out.
I guess I'm just wondering if we're doing the stretch of Columbus that goes to Beacon, just to make sure that we are
They do have, MDOT does have all
Absolutely.
of our plans to factor into
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
planning.
good.
One thing I want to add is that by doing these ahead of time like that, I've seen in the past is that we're shovel-ready, and a lot of times, a lot of other cities aren't quite ready, and then the MPOs, I think you're on that board, aren't you? Sometimes what happens is that they don't get a chance, they don't have the money to do it right away, and we can actually access more funds than being shovel-ready. So I congratulate you on moving forward on this.
Thank you, absolutely. We've been able to take advantage of a variety of grant programs because we're ready to go with the engineering and our plans.
Yep.
Do you have something, Ryan?
Yeah, I just want to add, I think, this is a really good example of kind of hopefully we have other funding sources that'll assist as well, but this is a good example of a pay-as-you-go strategy. These, the Columbus project's, I think, $3.6 million, the Fulton Street project's $3.1 million, and it's coming from a variety of fund balances and savings, right? Water, sewer,
Correct.
infrastructure, millage dollars that we've been starting to take in and then save up and build up and not just putting it out right away because we know we need to save for some projects. So, at this point, not looking like we're going to need any bonding, any debt service to do these really significant projects, but that's, good planning, on staff's part. So kudos to you and thank you for bringing these forward. So.
Yep, you're welcome.
Karen, you got anything? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Dana. Maria, please call the roll.
Fritz,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Okay, moving on to new business. Item A, would you read it for us, Maria?
Consideration by City Council of a resolution to approve a cost-sharing agreement for removal and replacement of the retaining wall on the west boundary line at 64 Poplar Ridge, adjacent to Westerly Boardwalk and Highland Park, in the not-to-exceed amount of $21,192, and authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the necessary documents. Administration recommends approval.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Kevin?
Second, yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
second from McLaughlin. Discussion? Ashley,
Get a
you
little-
want
yeah.
to lead off, maybe?
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, you all had tabled this item with largely a legal question, and we posed that question to our legal counsel, and that question was whether or not the city had the obligation but the authority to spend public resources on this retaining wall that's in question. And we did consult with our legal counsel, and after an extensive review of all of the historical documents and background and agreements that have been formed over time, he did ultimately get back to us and say, although it may largely be at our discretion, the retaining wall in question is depicted in the exhibit in the agreement, and that agreement does obligate the city to maintain and repair the retaining wall in question, which to that point, we did identify the right to pursue special assessments against the property. However, it's a little muddied or complicated because we did not ask that these property owners forfeit their right to challenge a special assessment. So in reviewing and interpreting that legal review and in the precedent we may have set in 2010 where we did agree to pay 1/3 of 2 retaining walls on Poplar Ridge, we ultimately decided to recommend approval. Sorry. In our city planner and Mrs. Bigelow, and I believe her contractors are also in the audience if there are additional questions. So this was ultimately a legal interpretation being brought back to you from your questions from the previous time.
Anybody got anything to say? Mike?
At one time, I voted yes for this, to have these done on this order. But after looking at it, and as we just stated by a gentleman in the audience here, talking about the trees and everything else, and if they would have maintained it better, it would have stayed there, but it's still an old wall. And since we already set a precedent a little bit, we might want to move forward with it, but I'm not really happy with. And by the ordinance, I think we can still special assess, can we not?
We can, but they have the right to challenge, so not suggesting they would challenge, but that's a clarification our legal review brought forward.
Karen?
Right, I would just like to clarify that, I think most historians know this, but all of the land in Highland Park was owned by the city, not by individual residents, through 1955, somewhere around 1950s. So those trees and those retaining walls were built while that was part of the city. The particular walkway that we're talking about, we call it a boardwalk. It is maintained for historical reasons by the Highland Park Association, but that is a sidewalk. That is a city sidewalk, and some of the houses along that is the only access that they have to their home. The wall is breaching. I frankly agree with the administration's recommendation to pay what precedence has shown, which was 30%, but I'd like to remind everyone that 50% was paid by the city just down the road for the retaining wall on Edwards and Lake, right on the corner of Edwards and Lake. And that was a much larger sum of money, much larger sum of money. This is a public walkway. In fact, some might find it surprising, but that used to be where the mail was delivered. That's why that was a public sidewalk all along Poplar Ridge. People used to get their mail delivered. Now, that's changed today, but that the circumstances have not with regard to the retaining wall. So I'm in agreement with the recommendation from the administration. Thank you.
Ryan?
You know, I just wish, you know, from my perspective, none of us here, at least well, no. Mike, you weren't here when this, all was kind of transferred. I wish I just understood some more of the history, because obviously I hear the history that the city owned the property, but at some point there was this transfer, and there was clearly language put into an agreement that, hey, you know, the city will maintain these, but you recognize that we're going to then probably assess you for these. It seems like that almost was the intent, but I wish I had a little bit more of that information on what was the thinking at the time and how these were going to be handled going forward. Was the thought that the city will just assess and that would be kind of an easier mechanism to collect dollars and the city would participate? Was there some understanding at the time that occurred? Was it truly to be left to future councils to decide, or was this kind of a, hey, you're taking over this land, this is the agreement that we have, this is part of you taking on this land, there's these responsibilities that come with that, you know, we understand that you'll have to assess us to maintain these going forward. I mean, I don't know that any of us really has, you know, all of that knowledge. You know, that's the thing about precedent, right? And we talk about that when we make decisions up here, and we point back to prior times that we've done certain things. But there are a lot of other retaining walls throughout this city, and at what point do we draw a line and say, you know, should the city be a participant on every one or not? I guess I'm torn on this.
The one thing that I will add is I don't know that we had the result from or asked the city attorney this, but part of the retaining wall does lay on city property, because there's lots of different wedges as it goes up the city property. 64, 65. Am I wrong, Mrs. Bigelow? Doesn't some of that touch your neighbor?
Yes, partially. Actually,
And
the top part of the wall is actually in the city right-of-way.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the city right-of-way, but the city,
But let me finish
ahead.
my
Yep.
point before you start your questioning.
It's complicated in Highland Park because everything was in existence from way back when, and then the property owners were allowed to purchase their lots, I think, in '53.
And the property lots were defined by the city, which explains some of the, you know, some of the ambiguity, I would say, in terms of that. But to suggest, Mr. Weavers, that a person was responsible because a 100-year-old tree sitting in her, you know, against two 100-year-old trees that were planted long before, you know, they owned the property is a little bit, no, no, I'm just, well,
Mike,
I'm responding,
please.
I'm just responding to your statement earlier, and, you know, this is, Highland Park is a little different. There are some, and prior councils have, as I said, this is historical precedence, but for two other retaining walls, they've paid 30%. For one just down the road, they paid 50%. This is coming forward with, I think in fairness, I don't think you should have to know somebody in order to get a fair shakeup here. I don't know what the circumstances were before. I don't know why certain people got their, you know, but I do believe that this is a fair, more than a fair request that Mrs. Bigelow has before us of offering to pay. And I would say, if you look at some of the detailed information, if this is, I'm getting at my question, I don't think we asked the attorney, but if that wall breaches and there's an accident, who's liable? Is the city liable? Because this is, you know, this was one of the most severe walls that was identified a few years ago in the study from Audubon March, the one that was most likely to, breach. So taking all of that in consideration, I believe we should I would agree with the administration's recommendation. I know you guys have thought about this pretty hard, and there's a lot of different pieces to this.
Well, the
Thank you.
streets and the sidewalks are all public. They're not private. And also, that sidewalk leads to, it's for public access to a fire hose box that's up on the boardwalk. As far as the trees being cutting down, you know, with critical dune, you're not really allowed to, lots of times, cut your trees down. So, I mean, usually we've left the trees. It just got to the point where, yes, one of them, I only cut down one, had to go because that was the worst. But there's other damage all along the wall going up the hill because the walls are really old. And in 2019 and 2020, the city and Abbenmarsh and the association all worked together to review these walls. And they came up with a plan to do it one-third, 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 one-third city, one-third association, one-third property owner. Our membership voted against it because a lot of them do not have walls, so they didn't feel that they should have to pay for a third. So that is why I was asking, based on the precedent of the 2010 walls, for one-third, and that I would pay the other two-thirds.
Kevin, you got anything?
Do you have any other questions?
Hang on, please, Mrs. Bigelow. That'd be great.
I actually agree with Mike and with Ryan. I'm a little conflicted on this one, too. I don't think we should be setting precedents, but at the same time, we have, you know, we've done this in the past. We don't know what went on in some of these discussions. So I'll probably support this, but I probably won't support very many more. I'll be very honest with you. I think this is just, this could, as Ryan said, this could go on and on and on. And I don't think we should be responsible for all of them. But because of what's gone on in the past, I'll support this.
Okay. Anybody got anything else they want to say? I want to first thank you, Mrs. Bigelow, for bringing this to us and for providing the background necessary to make a good decision. You've been entirely forthright in your approach, which I very much appreciate. And I'd like to apologize for the delay that I caused when I dragged it off the agenda the last time around. I'm going to distinguish what Karen said about this being, and actually what you said about this being a public walkway, because the purchase order or purchase agreement that you provided in the packet shows that the city transferred to the Highland Park Association in 1997 the rights-of-way parcels. So the land underlying this, part of it's yours on the uphill portion of the retaining wall, and part of it belongs to the Highland Park Association. It does not belong to the city. In 1997, it got transferred. The city reserved easements, and the easements they reserved were specifically for utilities and police, fire, and emergency. So essentially, the city does use that to respond only to Highland Park homes under those easements, to provide service to Highland Park homes and to provide emergency service to park homes. But Karen, you're wrong when you say it's a public sidewalk or it's a city sidewalk. That's simply not true.
There is no it is a public sidewalk. There is no public access to 3 homes then that we get taxes from other than on that sidewalk. So you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's a public sidewalk all the way up until it hits the
it shows that on
open
the
dune.
survey
It's
as
very,
well.
it's very
shows it on
clear.
the
The
survey.
rights of
You're
way,
wrong.
the land underlying the rights of way parcels was transferred to the Highland Park Association. Let me finish if I can, okay? And go ahead, you go.
No, well, I know I provided
That may not be.
right-of-ways, and I gave you that document, remember? And that was, they vacated certain right-of-ways for parking. But
The
sidewalk is still the city's because even the engineer that did the topographical survey pointed out that the wall that's up by lot number 65 is totally, it's not on her property.
No, it's not on her property.
And it's
but
not the
it's on-
association's property.
It
It's on
is
s-
on the association's property, I believe. Ashley?
it's on the city's
Well,
property. The
these
city's
are-
property
These are
is
the
in front.
specific questions I asked the city attorney to figure out, because to me, it would be
There's a
dispositive.
lot map.
But
It's
if
pretty
you look
easy.
at the quitclaim deed, it says that the city maintains ingress and egress, and that the association maintains the boardwalks. But we don't own that land that the boardwalks are on. And we don't own the land that the sidewalks are on.
Well, if you look at the quitclaim deed, it says the city quitclaim. I mean, this to me is why
Some of the other parking lot, that does not refer to that sidewalk.
Karen, it specifically says the parking lots, the park parcels, and the right-of-way parcels. That's what was transferred, okay? So I'm going to finish, and then we can vote, but...
So the road belongs to us too? Because the city maintains the road all the way in there.
Yes, they retained the roadways. And this is why when I asked for a legal review, the question is, who owns the underlying land? And I believe, based on what I've read and what the city attorney said, is we retained an easement through there, the city did, but the Highland Park Association should be here in this discussion because they own the underlying land.
No, we don't.
Okay, we disagree. The retaining wall runs along the west side of the Sweet and Bigelow Cottage property lines. I believe the Highland Park Association, that the document
We
you
don't
gave
own a
us-
strip of all the way through there. It's city land. That is the only act.
It was in 1997, it was transferred in the document that was in our package from the city to Highland Park Association. However, in the end, the city attorney, our city attorney, I asked whether we were obligated to participate in the restoration of these walls, and he believes we are. So even though I am reluctantly going to follow the city attorney's advice and support the staff's recommendation, but I think what you'll find, and I hear what you're saying, Karen, and I know you know a lot about Highland Park, but I asked the question 6 months ago. The answer we got is we've retained only this easement. That's essentially, and that the property we're talking about belongs to the Highland Park Association. If it does, then I think we should assess the Highland Park Association. But I think Mrs. Bigelow will have, and Mrs. Sweet will have put in more than their share. So I am going to vote to support this reluctantly based on our city attorney's interpretation of the 1997 purchase agreement, for what it's worth.
And Your Honor, I actually agree with you that we should pay for it, and if we find that you're right, I know you're wrong, I could say that, but on the ownership of that. But we should go after the Highland Park Association. I don't have any, wouldn't have any problem with that if that would be something you thought we should pursue. But
I
as far
actually
as-
think you should not participate in any discussion of the Highland Park Association because you're a member and have a direct financial interest in this matter,
So I shouldn't vote for anything on my neighbors, but you could vote on Franklin Street, anything, and you can vote on short-term rentals, and you have no, I don't understand that logic, but I don't have a conflict of interest, so I don't have any problem voting. Thank you.
So if I can just clarify,
around.
Mayor.
Yep.
So I think you're right, that the city, so you're indicating that because the city attorney indicated that the agreement states that we're responsible to maintain and repair them, that you want to vote yes tonight because they're asking us to repair and maintain them
I don't want to vote
tonight?
yes, but I am going to vote yes because the city attorney says we have an obligation under the 1997 purchase agreement. What I read that purchase agreement as, frankly, is the city's attempt, not a very effective attempt, to disengage from Highland Park. They sold off the parking lots, they sold off the park parcels, and they sold off the right-of-way parcels. I mean, they wanted to get out of Highland Park, and I think that was a perfectly appropriate thing to do. But the retaining walls, apparently, they didn't manage to disengage from. That's what it looks like. And that's pretty much what our city attorney has told us. Ashley, is that accurate?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I don't like it. I would have preferred we not have a contractual relationship with Highland Park that says we have some obligation to these walls, but apparently we do, and so I'm going to vote yes.
Right. But I think the greater question, though, is the city participating in the cost, or are we going to especially assess? I think that's what my comments were referred to. I think
I'm
the
sorry.
agreement.
Say it again, Ryan.
Right. I think the greater question is the city then going to be a participant in the cost, or are we going to especially assess the other portion?
I would love to
Because this-
specially assess, but I guess I would say that if Mrs. Bigelow is putting in 2/3, I wouldn't be specially assessing her.
No.
But I would be looking at the adjacent property owner who also benefits, because to me, a retaining wall benefits both sides, the property owners on both sides. The
Right.
uphill parcel is benefited, but the downhill parcel remains flat and useful
Right.
because there's a wall that clears it. So I think that it belongs to the Highland Park Association based on the documents we've been provided, though we haven't got a schedule. There's a schedule that's referenced in the document, and I asked Ashley, did the city attorney examine that? I think it's Schedule B, and she said he did and concluded that this was one of the parcels addressed by Schedule B. And so I think that based on his advice, I would do it, but I would recommend the city staff look at assessing the Highland Park Association. That's kind of where I came down. Yes.
My name is Joe Skenzel, 32 Honeymoon Hill, and while I don't represent Highland Park Association, I do live, and I was past president. There's some confusion because it's always been our understanding that the right-of-way, the walks as part of the agreement, are owned by the city. The association has agreed to maintain the walkways. So that was always a responsibility. In the previous situations where we had on Poplar Ridge, where we had to replace the walls, the rationale for that whole issue was the fact that if the walls came down, it would cause inconvenience and perhaps in an emergency situation, not ability for firefighters or work policemen to get access to the properties. The same thing I think applies here, is that this wall caves in, and granted, I don't think anybody really knows, none of us were around when the original agreement was written, so there's a lot of, confusion understanding what really took place or what the motivations or how they interpreted it. But if this present wall does fall down, it poses a property to Mrs. Bigelow's property. In addition to that, it's going to eliminate access using that boardwalk. And those boardwalks are rather historical in nature, and many people come into our neighborhood and walk the boardwalks. I mean, they find it fascinating. It's a part of the city's history. Highland Park itself is, and I don't think Highland Park is asking for any special consideration. I think the association has remained somewhat outside of this. They're willing to absorb some of the expenses that are involved with the replacement of the stairs that might be torn apart because of the replacement of this wall or whatever is done to it. But the association itself really doesn't have the resources to pay for all the walls. And so I think that, there's a historical significance, and I don't really think that, at least our understanding was the city does own the property. It was our agreement that the association was to maintain those boardwalks. So.
Well, it's interesting because here's the thing. If we don't, if Highland Park owns the property, as far as I can tell, it's because of the transfer that took place in this purchase agreement. And I've been told by Ashley, who has confirmed it with our city attorney, that transfer covered the property under this walkway, and therefore the contractual arrangement we made in that purchase agreement carries. If Highland Park doesn't own it, and then frankly, I don't believe the city owns it. If the city owns it, then I think the city gets to decide, does it build or not? But the third possibility is it got transferred to the Highland Park Association in some other way, in which case that contractual arrangement doesn't bind us to pay for these walls. I think it's a retaining wall between two private landowners, the Sweets and Bigelows and the Highland Park Association. Those are private landowners, all right? But I get that you guys don't think that. I hear that Councilmember Lowe doesn't think that. But I think that's it looked like this, we have in our package a quitclaim deed from the city
understand
of Grand Haven to the Highland Park Association conveying park parcels, parking lots, and right-of-way parcels. Well, if those aren't the right-of-way parcels, what are?
Well, I think that you're giving a new interpretation to something that has been a long understanding. And if that's the case, then I think city council has a responsibility to clarify the situation. Because right now, we're operating in an area where you have certain views by your interpretation. The attorney seems to say in his interpretation that, yes, the city has a responsibility, doesn't necessarily have to do anything, but they do have a responsibility. But if what you're saying is true, then we need to clarify this moving forward, because there are other walls. And granted, I mean, as Mrs. Bigelow points out, those walls were built in 1855 or whenever they were built. But, you know, something has to be done, because there will be future situations where you're going to be faced with the same sort of predicament. And so therefore, I say, you know, I think also you have to consider what the amount of money that Mrs. Bigelow is willing to pay for herself. mean,
I
if-
am,
You know, if
I
she were
admire
asking you
Mrs.
for the
Bigelow,
total
just
amount,
saying.
but she has taken, she's paying for all this, all the fees for the surveys, all the legal fees that have been involved. And this has started out from a project that was somewhat minor to something that's going to cost almost $100,000 for her. And so she's just asking for the city's help on the part to, you know, to offset some of her expenses. So, but
okay,
anyway, you know.
with respect to Mrs. Bigelow, which I have great respect, and I appreciate her position, you can also see that if there isn't any contractual obligation for us, and this is a retaining wall between two private parcels of property, then the city doesn't have responsibility. That is the problem. I know
understand.
there's a history, all right? But I think the 1997 document, the purchase agreement, transferred those parcels to Highland Park, to the association. But our city attorney has told us, in that agreement, we took on some we retained some responsibility for the retaining walls, and this is one of the retaining walls we retained some responsibility for. So I don't like it, but that's how I'm going to vote.
Good, okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, just overall to say that, I mean, the challenge that we have with these is, and I remember these during prior discussions that we had, that we were worried about a piecemeal approach with these, that if the city was responsible for repairing and these retaining walls, that if there was others that were failing at the same time that we needed to do some work on, that we would try to do more than just one, get economies of scale out of it, hopefully have a cheaper cost. I mean, you know, so when is this work expected to take place?
Hopefully this spring.
This spring? Okay.
You know, in response to that, I would say that this was, of that group that I think you and Councilmember Fritz reviewed, of maybe 20 retaining walls, this was one of the top 1, 2, 3 most severe, most urgent. And Mrs. Bigelow is asking for the exact same thing that you granted when you deliberated on all of these 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 30% that the city put in. That's the same thing that you agreed to at that time, when you looked at all of them all together.
That was offered to the Highland Park Association, and it was turned down. So I wouldn't really say there was any agreement there.
I disagree. I think the owners agreed to that. I think the only thing that wasn't agreed to is the Highland Park Association did not agree that all of those parcels, that they should participate in all of the, you know, a third of all of them. they had no problem with the city doing their third. They didn't agree with the split between the homeowner. And Mrs. Bigelow has just given up on that and has offered to pay 2/3, to take that out of the equation here.
Subject to approval of the association agreeing to pay a third, which they did not, as I explained, because not everybody has a wall. So unfortunately, at the time, I wish that we had pursued that then to say, okay, well, if the association isn't going to take on a third, perhaps we could set it up with 1/3 city, 2/3 property owner, that's why I'm asking it in that percentage.
What's interesting is you're the only one of all those walls that has come back to council since then.
Right.
Likely
I mean,
because of the
I have-
severity of that wall.
I have other walls, too, that were on that Abin Marsh study, but another one I'm repairing all on my own. I'm sort of surrounded by walls. But this one, because of its location, because of its lack of access, there's just barely 8 feet in between the two properties. So you can't get equipment, and you can't bring in equipment that's going to pound down heavily, because if you do that, it's going to affect my neighbor even more than me, the steep slope. I mean, there's a lot of complications in doing this wall, which makes it more expensive. It's not like you just drive the big truck up, take down a wall, and put up a new wall. And that's why I thought with this one, I'm not asking for all my other walls, but for this one, which is so difficult and so complicated, and, the public walkway, we're sort of intermingled between my wall exactly right there with this sidewalk. And that's why I was asking for assistance with this particular wall.
Kevin, you got something? What troubles me, and I'll be honest here, is that one of the enclosures in the packet you gave us is a letter from the Highland Park Association president, and I hear your neighbors say there's no resources in the Highland Park Association to do this, but the Highland Park Association, their dues are $400 a year. And from my perspective, you have a large campus at this point that you've assumed responsibility for as an association, and condominium complexes around the country typically charge that a month, or more. So I think it's only going to get worse as time goes by, that the association is going to have to face up to greater financial obligations. And I don't like that the city that the city attorney says we've retained some of those, but I think we should pay for what we agreed to pay for, and do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I do. I mean, our dues are $600 now, and we have special assessments when we have certain things. But it's different than a condo because we're not, we're all private property owners.
It is different, you're right.
And so we're not having our roofs replaced, or we're not having our exterior redone, or things like that. So the dues primarily pay for garbage pickup, for repairing, and a lot of it is in repairing the boardwalks. We collect our leaves. I'm trying to think of what else. It's not a lot. I mean, the roads are city roads, so we don't have to repair the roads or anything. So that's why the dues are sufficient enough to keep up our maintenance. And then if we have to do, like in the past few years, we've had to redo a lot of the boardwalks. So then we'll have a special assessment just to complete those boardwalks.
Yes, ma'am. But if, as I believe, the Highland Park Association took on responsibility for these rights-of-way parcels and the park parcels and the parking lots, it's...
We do maintain the parking areas. We do maintain that.
Okay. I think we each have to sort out how we're going to vote, and I have great respect for the way you brought this forward, and I don't honestly like supporting it, but I'm going to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody's interest. Thank you.
Yep. Maria, would you please call the roll?
Lowe,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
McNally,
Yes. Okay. Reports by city council. Who'd like to start? Mike Wood? How about Kevin starts? Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin, you go ahead. You be first this time.
Some of us attended, in fact, 4 of us attended the MML conference last week. That was very interesting. There was a lot of great speakers. Frankly, I'd never been up to Traverse City, so I was lucky to see that part of the state. But it was very, very informative. But it was kind of interesting. They had one of the speakers, who was a very dynamic speaker, had a pyramid of all the different things that a city should do, but at the very top of it, he said, "Got to have some fun." And I think that's what the city needs, is a little bit of fun. And it's been last couple of months have been pretty contentious, and I just hope that we get through all that. We as a city need to do that. We've got a great city here that we all love dearly, and I just hope that we can start to have fun a little bit. And I encourage everyone to get out and vote tomorrow.
Mike?
Yes, I encourage everybody to get out there and vote, of course.
Especially for you.
Yeah, well, and I'm here, and that's, everybody knows who I am. They see what I've done, so it doesn't matter, Kevin. I haven't changed. In 20 years I've been here, I haven't changed, and I never will, and I don't plan on it, and I'll still support the Tigers. But you're right, we went up to MML, and I took in a couple of seminars in there. One was on Justice 40. It's an initiative that was signed by President Biden, and it gives us a chance. I didn't know if we'd be supportive on it or not, because we didn't know if we fall in the category of being a low income. Talking with the person that was from Washington there, she says, yes, you are. You still can. There's like 45 different organizations that we can apply to get some assistance toward Harbor Island. And there's 400 and some other areas, they said there. So we need to actually take a good look at Justice 40 and take a look at, see what we can apply for and what we can go forward on it. So it was a really good seminar. Also, we took a tour. It was really nice, of the Commons, and we got to walk through the tunnel and that, and got to go through a building that was actually, we had to sign a waiver, fell through the holes in the floor and whatever else. But learned a lot about the asylum up there, and some of the practices that was going on today actually came from Traverse City itself. So it was really, really unique for us. It was good. And you're right, a lot of the speakers, it was very interesting to see the Cherry Republic guy. He's just a common guy, I'll tell you right now. When he's up there talking, it was just like, I'm talking right now. He just had fun, and he started out having a good time at it, and he still enjoys it, and he gives back to his community. I can't believe anybody gives as much as he gives. After I've listened to him, what he supports and where he does with his extra money that comes in, how he pushes it out there. I applaud him for being a great supporter up there in Traverse City area. And this probably, I don't know if this would be my last time or if I'd do it again or not, but I tell you what, it's been a great 20 years for me, and this town is nothing better. I hope it's better since I've been here. I've seen things change over 20 years and that, and I hope to be here again for another 4 years. It's been a pleasure working with you, Mayor. I tell you what, it's been great. This is your last meeting, so I want to congratulate you on your 2 years of putting in here.
Seems kind of
Yeah.
paltry compared to 20 months.
Yeah, well, as I said before, when you're the mayor, no matter what we do down here, all the arrows go just like this. No matter what you say or what we say, everybody blames the mayor for whatever they do. It's not necessarily always the mayor's fault. And always times when you turn around, sometimes they always blame it on the city manager. Well, you got to remember, she takes directions from 3. There's 5 of us here. She takes direction from 3. And so she has to follow the pattern. It's the same thing whenever any other city manager we've had all the way through the years. You can put them down and say they did bad, they were good, they were bad, but the thing is, they're following the direction of the major people on council. So that's what we have to remember when we're up here. We have to support the people out there, and that's what we should be doing. And we should show a happy face. I'm always trying to smile. I tell you what, you guys can beat me up all the time. Sometimes I don't get my way, but I tell you, at the end of the night, I still got my smile. I go home, I relax, and I start the next day. It's all over. It's behind me. So I want to say thank you for everybody I worked with in the past and now, and hopefully more in the future. So that's all I got to say, Mayor.
Thank you, Mike.
Oh, one more thing.
The Tigers?
The Tigers. They acquired a guy from Milwaukee. He's an outfielder, first baseman, and he's got a great on-base percentage. So we got a good start.
It's good. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for your 20 years of service. Karen?
Sure. Tim, do you have the slides? First of all, I want to apologize to people for some of my typos in my report. And I want to thank one of our residents, Ms. Linda Weavers, for identifying a couple of those errors. I want to let you all know I have fired my executive assistant, or I was going to fire my executive assistant. But since he's my husband, I'm going to give him a second chance. Let him try to do it one more time before. Anyway, since tonight really marks the end of this particular council's representation and my midterm in office, I thought it was really important for us to focus on some of the positive things that we've been able to accomplish. And I'm really very proud, and I want to thank everyone at this table for coming together and being able to make progress in some of these key areas, even in a very difficult, politically charged, and sometimes hostile environment. For example, over the past 2 years, City Council has set aside nearly $2 million in the general fund. We've begun the very difficult task of addressing the $30+ million unfunded pension liability. Not something that we created, something that built slowly from 2009 to today. But we did that through working with our unions to close the obsolete underfunded pension to all new hires and offering existing employees the opportunity to move to a 401k-style retirement plan. We assumed the leadership in solving the environmental challenges on Harbor Island through a holistic versus a siloed approach. We accelerated the replacement of thousands of public and residential lead water lines in the city through successful grant applications. We supported the growth of the Hispanic Heritage Festival and a new Pride event, making our community a more welcoming place for all. We hired the first female city manager for Grand Haven. Yay. We purchased police body and vehicle cameras for our Department of Public Safety. We increased transparency as well as community access with the live streaming of City Council and important commission meetings, along with agenda packet previews posted publicly and available on our website. We strengthened the East End, Beach Street corridor and neighborhood through the creation of a commercial rehabilitation district. We authorized the formation of a Sustainability and Energy Commission to develop a community energy plan and advise on sustainability goals for our city. And due to the SEC's efforts, Grand Haven has achieved a gold certification in the Michigan Green Communities. We saved the historic diesel plant on Harbor Island from destruction and approved the designation of the city fire barn building as a local historic landmark. Anyway, I want to thank you all for all that. I think it's sometimes easy to think about just some of the struggles we've had versus looking at some of the accomplishments. But in all of that, I also thought it would be important to leave you with what I think, aside from Harbor Island, some of our biggest challenges are going to be over the next few years. And I picked two of what I think are the least understood challenges. The first one being the pension, liability, the unfunded pension liability. As you can see in this table, the last time the city's pension was over 100% funded was in 2008. by 2010, we had an unfunded pension liability or debt of 1.7 million. 2012, 8.5 million. 2014, it was over 15 million. 2016, it was over 25 million, and so on. How does this debt compare to other cities? This is serious. According to the Michigan Department of Treasury, the pension health of the city of Grand Haven is in the bottom 6th percentile. It's ranked 15th worst of 272 cities in the state of Michigan. On a per capita basis, Grand Haven's unfunded pension liability is $2,342 per capita, nearly 3 times that of the city of Muskegon's and almost 14 times that of Holland's. Now, that's just the unfunded, underfunded component. Our annual expense payments to fund the pension are the equivalent of 2.5 mils of an operating millage of less than 10 mils. This will continue to rise exponentially through 2040, putting services such as our public safety and public works at risk, as well as the capital projects for road resurfacing, infrastructure, and park improvements. Again, this is not something that this council created, but we have begun the difficult task of addressing it. I'm proud to say that we have done that through tackling the root cause of the pension issue, and done more to do that in the past 2 years than was done in the entire 10 years before. But that's just the first step. It stops the bleeding. It just means 50 years from now, we're not going to have a pension problem. The annual expense payments for the pension will continue to rise, so there's more work to be done. We need to pay down the unfunded liability by finding other sources of significant revenue, wherever that is. Borrowing is no longer an option for us. When interest rates were low, that was a possibility. It no longer is. So we really need to look, elsewhere. I hope you agree, but I believe it would be irresponsible of City Council to kick this can down the road for future generations to address. Your newly elected council will have some very difficult decisions regarding just how to move forward with that. The other challenge that I think is a little bit difficult to understand is some of our demographic shifts. Last year, we updated our master plan, and we put together a draft of Grand Haven's very first strategic plan using data from the 2020 U.S. Census. We had some, marked shift in some of the population demographics that's worth discussing. It's gone largely unnoticed and uncommented on, but it has some implications. And I want to call out here, and in the document, the correct numbers are in the graph here in the shift in the age, but both of those numbers were totaled incorrectly in my report. 2010, the percentage of our younger population under the age of 35 was 40.9. In 2019, that dropped to 35.8. But those shifts have had, as you start to look at some of the data, we can see some ancillary, some unintended consequences, and some implications. It also means that we have a declining percentage of population participating in the available workforce. So what's happening is really, I'm sorry, let me back up. The overall population, Grand Haven, increased 5.8% in the 2020 or 2019, between 2010 and 2019. But most of that came in the over 65 and up segment, and it was at the expense, some of that growth was at the expense of the younger population, which is what I was talking about, the shift in age distribution, the under 35. So we have a declining percentage of population participating in the workforce. This has contributed to some of the year-to-year decline in the school enrollment historically, particularly in the last 5 years from 2017 to 2022. Grand Haven Area Public Schools has forecasted a continued year-to-year decline in the enrollments from 2022 to 2027 as part of their strategic plan, which is available online. That decrease in the number of young families, and then also simultaneously having more seniors over the age of 65 has resulted in fewer people per household, creating additional demand on affordable and attainable housing. So when we were in Traverse City, as Councilmember McLaughlin mentioned, we attended some seminars, and we found out we're not alone in some of these demographic shifts and some of the concerns. In fact, particularly about what's happening with the migration of some of our younger families, because economically, we need those young families. It is, and some of the comments that I wrote down that other municipalities were mentioning that it's difficult to get the attention of the under 40, the young family segment of our citizens engaged in public service on our boards and commissions or even in elected office because they're so very busy at this particular life stage. One of the other things that they cautioned us on was that certain segments on the other end of the spectrum can be overrepresented from a voice and from an engagement in public service. And it's just something that we all have to kind of think about, making sure that we're thinking about who's not at the table and who's not at the room, speaking in order to represent all of our constituents, as well as in order to move forward with strategic decisions about planning for our city. Net, attracting a younger population to live in and raise families in Grand Haven is not just desirable, but for most of our cities, like Grand Haven, it's an economic imperative. Some of you have heard or read about Governor Whitmer's efforts to recruit young people and talent to Michigan, the You Can in Michigan campaign. That too was based on the 2020 census data and population segment shifts. Our community may want to take a page out of that playbook as we plan for the future. If we don't want to become a retirement and snowbird kind of, if we want the full spectrum of our population, because it's actively shifting as we're making decisions. So, and just in closing, I just wanted to bring those two issues to, I guess, under discussed issues to your attention, and get out there and vote. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Karen, for that. So I'm kind of reflecting a little bit this evening as well, as I'm at the end of a 4-year term and on the ballot tomorrow for hopefully another term, but that will be up to the voters to decide tomorrow. But for me, as I was kind of thinking back over 4 years, I remember my first council meeting and sitting up here as a council member. I remember I had sat in these seats as a planning commissioner, but I remember sitting down and just kind of thinking, wow, I was able to just kind of walk up here as a council member and sit down, and no one questioned that. And it was just simply recognized that you were elected and you would sit in this seat for 4 years and have to make decisions on the things that come before you on the first and third Monday at 7:30 of every month. And at that time, I never would have thought that just a few months later, I'd be sitting in my living room looking at my fellow council members and our staff, and we'd be sitting there on Zoom during a pandemic making decisions and doing our best to try to keep our government operations going, to still provide great services for our community. And at a time when none of us really knew which direction it was going to head and where we would end up in the end. But we did the best that we could. We acted quickly to support our businesses, to expand outside. We really greatly appreciated our parks and our outdoor spaces that we had. Never would have thought that the Chinook Pier buildings that I was a month into office and we were approached with. We got a report back that the mold in the Chinook Pier buildings was so significant that the cost to repair and do anything with them was beyond what they were worth, and the recommendation was we need to tear down these buildings. And Ashley at that time was tasked with, find a way to transition our businesses to other places and hopefully make that pain a little less than what it was going to be. Never would have saw that one coming. And then as we've gone along, I never would have thought that we'd be facing $40 to $80 million in costs to remediate environmental issues on Harbor Island that had been there for several years. And but that's the job of a council member, right? You have a challenge that comes before you, and you take it on, and you have to figure out how to tackle it and address it, and count on a great staff team and work together and take it head on. And we did exactly that. And fast forward, 4 years, and I'm at the end of my term. And a few months ago, I was here early for a meeting, and it was just me in this room, which is rare that any of us, I think, has this room completely probably to ourselves. And I was just sitting, and I was just looking out, into the seats. But I was really looking back at the corner there at where mayors of the past, their faces on the wall, and I thought about the many decisions that past councils had to make in this chamber over several decades. Some were straightforward, and others were complicated, messy, and maybe even controversial. Sometimes the room was full. There was overflow in the hallway, and the meeting went several hours. And then there was probably other meetings that had very few in attendance, and they were quick meetings. And I remember thinking about the words of Theodore Roosevelt. They came to mind. It's a speech that was originally titled Citizenship in a Republic, and it's now known as the Man in the Arena speech, which he delivered in 1910, right after his presidency in Paris. And I'm just going to read just a short piece of it. It's actually a pretty lengthy speech, but he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never know victory nor defeat." So as I end this evening, I just want to say I'm really grateful to the citizens of Grand Haven for having allowed me to serve in the arena. Thank you to my fellow council members and having the opportunity to serve alongside you for the last 2, and Mike, in your case, 4 years. It's been an honor, and I really encourage folks to vote tomorrow. So that's all I have.
I don't have a big speech. I just wanted to remind people to go out and vote. And as I reflect on my experience as mayor, I've learned a few things. The first is our city and BLP employees do an incredible job. They are knowledgeable, helpful, hardworking. I look at the crews out plowing and cleaning up after our storm last week and our reliable electric power at a time when our neighbors to the north went without for days, and know we are blessed to live in a municipality where government works for us. It has been my honor to work with our employees, and I very much appreciate their service. Second, this community seems to have an endless well of goodwill, with people finding diverse and interesting ways to serve, with the city on boards and commissions, but also in many worthy church, youth, civic, and service organizations that keep us vibrant, relevant, and strong. And it's been my honor to just see a little piece of that along the way. Third, the government decisions that have the most direct impact on our lives are made close to home. We will all be better off if more people pay attention to local government, and the city of Grand Haven has made it as simple as possible to do so. I've been impressed by the people who show up regularly at council meetings, like Jim Hagan, for instance, or Steve Miller, Mike Weavers, Mac Davis. There's a Jeff Miller. There's a cast of characters. All right, and I'm glad that they're watching. I've also been impressed by the people who follow our meetings streamed. I've got friends who tell me they sit on Monday nights with a glass of wine and listen to our meetings, and I think they probably go down better that way. But democracy can be messy, but an informed citizenry will make us stronger. I appreciate the trust the voters of Grand Haven have placed in me, and I have been honored to serve. Thank you. Ashley?
Nothing on my end. Just wanted to thank you, Mayor McNally, for your service and your dedication and commitment to this community, but also your commitment and support of our city staff. It hasn't gone unnoticed or underappreciated. Thank you.
Maria, got anything for us?
Polls are open from 7 to 8 p.m. tomorrow.
Say it again, I'm sorry, I laughed.
Polls are open from 7 to 8 p.m. tomorrow. If you have an absentee ballot, you can still turn it in up until 8 p.m. at City Hall.
Perfect, thank you, Maria. I think we're at the second call to the audience. At this time, members of the audience may address council on any issue, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address and will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Those not physically present may call in at 616-935-3203. We will take all callers. Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, Jim Hagan, 400 Lake. I'd like to encourage the city administration and the next council to look more at the Highland Park Agreement in more detail. My significant other, Carol LaCoe, borders Highland Park, so I've seen all those documents. And I just want to add that Ryan Cotton is still around. He signed all these documents that were involved in the 97 transfer and so forth. So I would suggest that somebody talk to Ryan and find out what he thought was going on with all these agreements. Thank you.
It's good advice, Jim.
Mike Weaver, 637 Lake Avenue. I guess on some positive notes here, I appreciate anybody who puts themselves out there for elected office. I know it's not easy. I would like to do it, but I like Florida more. So anyways, I do think we should consider, and I don't know what rules are out there, but we should maybe consider allowing not just our council staff, but our other staff, or our, I should say, people on the boards, a percentage of time where they can Zoom call in. It worked during the pandemic, it should work now. People shouldn't always have to attend in person. That's just a suggestion to get really good qualified people. There are a lot of people my age, younger and older, but you're not always here. And yet, I've got 61 years of experience in this town. I've done a lot, I've been around a long time. Mike's known me forever, and I've known Mike forever, and there is something to be said for the experience that we have garnered over the years. It's a lot. And I'm sure we've forgotten more than we've retained, but hey, that's the way it goes. I would like to say that Ashley and her staff have been doing a fantastic job. I'll be quite honest, I was very concerned about bringing in so many new people, but there wasn't really a choice. But here's the thing, they've been doing phenomenal. I have been very impressed. People are getting back to you quickly. The job's getting done quickly. There's always room for improvement, but it could be way worse. So I'm very happy with what's happening. I see a marked improvement over our current management over the previous. So I'm very excited about that. And I think we've got a lot of potential in the future. In regards to our mayor, thank you so much for putting your retirement on hold. I don't know why you did that, but I know you felt there was a need and you were willing to put yourself out there. And through the easy part and the really hard parts, because there have been a lot of hard parts with this council, all the effort you put in is appreciated by not just me, not just by my wife, my children, but I think a good chunk of this town. I don't think they understood what you were up against. And you came in cold, and that's tough to do. So again, I think everybody who does public service, I know it's not easy. I'm one of the people who, when things are running well, you won't hear from me. But when things aren't, you're going to hear, because I do believe that people are paid to do their job, and that's the way it should go. So anyways, thanks to all of you. One thing I would just mention in regards to spending money, this town has been too happy doing it. Wants versus needs. Let's get those in perspective. And if something's not in the budget, push it out a year and get it in your budget. You can do this. We've done it before. We have made this town financially sound. We can do it again. But you can't do it when you're spending money here and there. It's only 10 or 20,000. So anyways, thanks again, Mayor. Thanks to all of you, and have a great evening.
Thank
And,
you, Mike.
Good luck on everybody on the election tomorrow.
Anybody else?
It's a serious evening. I'm Field Reichart. I live at 1053 Ohio, and I have a very, very short quotation for you, which is appropriate for a lot of reasons. This is from Abraham Lincoln. Elections belong to the people. It's their decision. If they decide to turn their back on the fire and burn their behinds, then they will just have to sit on their blisters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Field. Okay, meeting's adjourned.